so much for joining us. I do hope we can talk to you later. We seem to be having some network issues, but thank you very much for taking the time in joining us. We now move over to East Asia for our next story, where the French President Emmanuel Macron has arrived in South Korea for a state visit. This comes following his visit to Japan. In Japan, Macron signed a roadmap on critical minerals and defense cooperation, and on Thursday held more talks with Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi and met the imperial couple with his wife Brigitte. Macron's two-day itinerary in South Korea includes a summit with President Lee Jae-myung, a visit to the War Memorial to pay tribute to French soldiers who fought in the Korean War, as well as an economic forum and a dinner with K-pop stars and South Korean synesthetes. Joining us once again is Dr. Seijiro Takeshita. He joins us live from Tokyo. He's a professor at the University of Shizuoka. Once again, thank you very much for joining us. Macron in South Korea just left from Tokyo, where we saw a meeting with Sanai Takaichi. How do you perceive that current relationship? Of course, Japan and the likes of Japan and South Korea and also Europe, in this strange situation where there is an unpredictable US president in charge. We saw the US president endorse the likes of Sanai Takaichi. How do you assess that situation currently? Of course, there's a huge difference between that relationship, that transatlantic relationship, and that relationship that America has with those Indo-Pacific partners. What more can you tell us about Macron's position going into South Korea and his broader East Asia tour in general?
Well, Macron's position is obviously to basically consolidate a lot more solidarity amongst, the medium powers in order to sustain, distribution of various issues, particularly energy. In case of France, 70% of reliance is on nuclear side, and obviously they need to get a stable supply of uranium. And for that point of view, Japan is in the same region. Basically, we used to have 30%, reliance on nuclear, but that's dropped to zero after the great earthquake in 2011. But we're trying to basically claw it back to 20% by 2030 because our industry is based on issues like precision machinery or semiconductors, which need stable energy like that of nuclear. So basically, there is a mutual benefit, going forward to shake our hands. And but the geopolitical side is quite different because if you look at the fact that Japan is facing China, of course, there's Sea of Japan, but nevertheless, that's our neighbor. And we have 130 U.S. base here in Japan. So, from the geopolitical factor, there are quite, a big difference with Monsieur Macron. But it's quite true, as Prime Minister Carney is trying to convey the message that we need to consolidate these medium power. That is very true, particularly on means of, international distribution of goods.
How important is that European and East Asia, those East Asian alliances like Japan and South Korea, going to be moving forward now that China, of course, is a player one can't ignore, and the US is even more unpredictable than ever? No one knows how long term that's going to be, but what are your thoughts on that?
Crucial. I mean, it is inevitable that these two regions have to tie up because the fact of the matter is we want to basically walk away from the excessive reliance to China, which we realized during COVID-19. So international supply chain has to be basically avoided away from excessive reliance to China. But now, look at the leader of the free world, look what they're doing and the actions they're taking basically to corrupt, the bridges that have been built amongst all these allies. So obviously, what we have to do, we have no other choice but for these medium power nations to basically consolidate together in order to avoid, further risks from hitting us, particularly in means of energy.
In terms of European, in terms of European issues, Your Russia-Ukraine war, among other things of European concern. And of course you have your equal issues in the Indo-Pacific. Do you see those two, the East Asian and the European nations taking a stand together, moving closer on these issues?
I think danger of unitarian states like that of Russia and China has been reconfirmed, particularly during the COVID-19 era. And the methodology that, for example, China is taking, which is utilizing both the economic power and the geopolitical military power, is quite frightening. And I think many of not only the governments, but, corporations are starting to realize on that. So I think, this move, of course, we need China in many senses because it's a crucial part of the global economy. But that said, excessive reliance to a country that is based on Unitarian philosophy is something that we have to avoid because, let's face it, U.S. under Mr. Trump is definitely going that direction. So, this is somewhere that we have to basically consolidate together amongst other powers to basically avoid further risks from hitting us.
Dr. Seijiro Takeshita, thank you so much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's a great pleasure to get your insight. We now turn to Europe, where a Russian air attack has struck a port in Ukraine's Odessa region, setting shippers on fire. Video released by emergency services show rescuers working at the site in Chornomorsk as flames burn through stacked containers. No casualties have been reported so far, and Regional Governor Oleg Kiper said the attack involved drones targeting the area early on Thursday. Specialists are assessing the extent of the damage and the circumstances of the incident. Although the situation is currently under control, port facilities are secured and repair work has begun where necessary. We move on